Hello, and welcome to The Real USA. Today we're at the U.S. Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. We thank you for your interest in the program and in these stories from the United States, brought to you in a way that only Telesur could do. On today's show, we'll discuss allegations of sexual assault against a cultural icon, and also allegations of torture against CIA interrogators in the aftermath of September 11th. I'm Alexandra Hall. As you watch these stories, I encourage you to share your comments and suggestions via our Twitter @TelesurEnglish. Street harassment has become a serious topic of conversation in the United States since a video went viral of a woman who walked around New York City for one day and was verbally harassed 100 times. While some people say that comments and catcalls are just words, others argue that verbal harassment is the first step before other offenses. Patrice Howard has a report.
The streets of New York City are among the noisiest in the world. A siren here or a taxicab there can be jarring. But Kiara Ortiz says she only cringes at the sound of strangers harassing her on the street.
Walking on the street, I experienced it at least once a week, sometimes more than once a day.
The comments may sound innocent enough, but Kiara says the unsolicited compliments she receives from men she passes are often about her looks and are anything but flattering.
It makes me feel vulnerable and like I'm not welcome in the space that I'm in. It makes me feel like I'm getting unwanted attention.
The gawkers sound something like this.
Hey, baby. Hey, beautiful.
This video of one woman's 10-hour stroll through New York City exposes more than 100 instances of verbal harassment and recently went viral. Kiara says it's not a reflection of her daily life, but does reveal a glaring form of aggression on American streets that's largely ignored. A recent study by Stop Street Harassment, the nonprofit Kiara blogs for, found that 65% of American women have experienced street harassment, and that those encounters can often provoke other sexually driven acts.
I think it should be illegal because it can also lead to other forms of aggression if we don't do anything about it.
Not everyone agrees.
I think there's a little bit of scaremongering in this video. I think that it does send a message that, someone who's walking on the streets of New York and they don't have a moment to themselves.
Lizzie Crocker is a reporter and woman living in New York. Her recent article suggests that there is no way to define street harassment, and because of that, it's impossible to prosecute.
I think that there are crimes and there are cultural issues and cultural problems, and men acting boorishly, making misogynistic remarks. That's a cultural issue, but we don't need to legislate against that.
Many forms of street harassment are illegal in New York, like verbal assault and stalking. But until there's a way to separate criminals from those innocently sharing a compliment, videos like this will only shed light on an unavoidable annoyance on American streets. An interesting takeaway from that street harassment study is that men are also victims. Though not everyone can agree if the callouts are crimes or forms of free expression, the women we spoke to can agree that educating others about this public annoyance is the best way to stop street harassment in its tracks. Patrice Howard for Telesur, New York.
As one of the first high-profile African-American actors in U.S. history, Bill Cosby is famous for breaking racial barriers on The Cosby Show. But in recent weeks, over a dozen women have come forward accusing the actor of sexual assault, and many people refuse to believe the allegations against America's dad could be true. Our Los Angeles correspondent Verity Geer reports.
In Hollywood, Bill Cosby has been one of America's most treasured celebrities for decades. But now the comedy legend has gone from TV dad to accused sexual predator, and even entertainment industry insiders are shocked.
I was a kid in the 80s, so I grew up with The Cosby Show. And I feel like I had heard rumors over the years that mainly of infidelity and possibly illegitimate children, but I had never heard rape accusations.
Many Cosby fans across the nation can't believe what they're hearing.
He was one of the very first black pioneers to break it into Hollywood.
Rather sketchy and in my opinion, I think it's false.
What disturbs me is people are waiting 25 and 30 years to accuse the man.
But as the allegations have mounted, a growing number are reconsidering their view of Cosby.
He had a lot of money and power, so he had the opportunity to do these things, but until proven, we don't know.
The controversy has already hit Bill Cosby hard. The online network Netflix cancelled a comedy special, and NBC has shelved plans to produce a new sitcom featuring the star.
I just don't see how, given the situation, Netflix or NBC could have continued with the show. I mean, who would watch it? The backlash would be incredible.
Cosby has remained silent, literally silent, in a recent radio interview.
This question gives me no pleasure, Mr. Cosby, but there have been serious allegations raised about you in recent days. You're shaking your head no. I'm in the news business. I have to ask the question. Do you have any response to those charges? Shaking your head no. There are people who love you who might like to hear from you about this. I want to give you the chance. All right.
Despite his silence over the allegations, Cosby has continued his one-man show. Cosby is in the middle of a stand-up tour, doing dozens of dates across America and Canada, but venues have already started to cancel. Legal analysts say most of the accusations against Bill Cosby are so old, America's statute of limitations makes any kind of arrest or criminal prosecution highly unlikely. Cosby's real battle for now is in the court of public opinion. America's dad trying to hold on to America's admiration. Verity Gear for Telesur, Los Angeles.
Even though President Obama has publicly acknowledged the United States engaged in torture following September 11th, a recently released Senate intelligence report details the specifics of just what kind of abuse occurred. Let's watch the report.
Proceeding on the bill.
En el Senado.
The U.S. Senate has finally published the torture report, finished 2 years ago.
2 años.
The report released today examines the CIA's secret overseas detention of at least 119 individuals and the use of coercive interrogation techniques, in some cases amounting to torture.
In this cold and lonely winter, the U.S. population received clear evidence that torture in the CIA was a common practice.
I didn't know that happened, but I would like to know more details before I make a definite conclusion. It's shocking.
Those are dictatorship acts. I don't think right now the USA is a dictatorship. If they have been doing, then they have to bear the consequence of their act. Of course, because it is shocking. I didn't expect something like this from this country.
According to the report made by Special Intelligence of the Senate, the CIA paid over $18 million on psychologists that helped them develop and apply the so-called interrogation enhanced technique. For instance, such techniques have caused the death of an innocent inmate. He died of hypothermia after he was kept naked and chained for days.
And as the committee's report makes clear, it produced little useful intelligence to help us track down the perpetrators of 9/11 or prevent new attacks and atrocities.
The CIA's torture program was banned by President Obama. However, even though the U.S. subscribed to the UN Convention Against Torture, several organizations continue denouncing the application of such techniques in American prisons.
Nasal tube is inserted and it's running down the back.
This is a dramatization of forced feeding, a torture technique that is currently used with Guantanamo inmates. This prison is located in Cuban territory and is home to 136 prisoners, most of them innocent people who have endured the torture mechanism that are institutionalized under pretext of the war on terror.
Francesca Manuele, Washington DC, Telesur.
CIA Director John Brennan has responded publicly to allegations of torture following the release of a Senate intelligence report. In his statements, Brennan justified what he called enhanced interrogation techniques, and he said that methods that were used were at least somewhat effective in gathering useful intelligence. Let's hear more about what he had to say.
The CIA director eluded the institution's responsibility, saying that tortures were carried out as ordered by the Bush administration. The UN Convention Against Torture, ratified by the US, considers that such techniques are crimes. However, Brennan defended the use of torture.
Detainees who were subjected to EITs at some point during their confinement subsequently provided information that our experts found to be useful and valuable in our counterterrorism efforts.
The CIA had engaged.
The report shows that the CIA lied over interrogation in 20 cases. The institution said the cases had provided valuable information using the so-called enhanced interrogation techniques. Michael, a former Army interrogator and advisor, gave counsel to the Senate committee that issued the report.
So this program was never designed as an interrogation program that was informed by professional interrogators. Torture is one of those things that may work at some level to get you to talk, but you're going to say whatever you think I want to hear.
Information reveals new details. Though these practices are not new, we learned about their existence a decade ago. In 2009, President Obama ruled out the torture program. Now, the only person in prison is John Kiriakou, a former CIA agent who first denounced the practices.
Point is accountability. It starts with the CIA. Obviously, they're the ones implementing the program. They were the ones leading it. But it's clear that various folks in the Bush administration.
However, the CIA and other officials involved have carried out other crimes during these years, crimes that intended to cover previous crimes. For example, in 2005, dozens of video cassettes depicting tortures.
Abuses revealed in the report include outright murder of detainees in CIA custody. And well after the fact of those original human rights violations, the CIA destroyed evidence of its interrogations, essentially attempting to evade justice, hacked the US Senate, stole its documents, and lied about all that.
Even though Americans seem to be shocked with these practices carried out during Bush administration, other methods of torture have surfaced. One of them are force feeding, extreme temperatures in cells, and solitary confinement.
Francesca Emanuele, Washington DC, Telesur.
Radical Art in the Red Decade is the name of an art exhibition that was recently held near Chicago. There, hundreds of artists gathered to create a left-wing union with social conscience. Our correspondent Clara Ibarra has the story.
The Left Front, Radical Art in the Red Decade, 1929-1940, is an art exhibition that began at the Mary and Lee Museum near the city of Chicago and soon will be touring the U.S. The show looks at a moment in U.S. cultural history when artists joined forces to form a left front and make socially conscious art available to more people. We talked to Jill Bugaski, one of the curators of the exhibition.
The Red Decade revisits a period in the United States history that was filled with turmoil, both economic and social turmoil. It was the decade that followed the Great Depression, the stock market crash of 1929, and at this period, with so many people out of work and such a feeling of desperation in the general economy and in the world, these artists that we represent banded together as social activists to advocate for workers and working class rights, to maybe question whether the capitalist system that had got us into this terrible depression was fulfilling its promises to the average American people.
The exhibition is built around two artist groups, the John Reed Club and the American Artists Collectives. Both had a strong affiliation for the socialist practices of the Soviet Union, who appeared to be succeeding at a moment when the United States capitalist system was faltering. The exhibition touches upon subjects such as class struggle, racial equality, workers' rights, and technology.
A lot of people don't realize this, but so much of this labor organizing that happened in the 30s and even in the 20s is what gave us the laws that provided the foundation for prosperity in the post-war period. Things like the 8-hour workday, the child labor laws, Social Security, pensions. The cause of worker rights really is something that's benefited everyone in the long 20th century. These prints were the viral media of the 1930s. Like this there was such an important idea about production and dissemination. And this is really the roots. These are the grandfathers of the art for the masses movement. Print democracy was a hugely important question in the 1930s, and these artists sought to make as many prints as possible for a really affordable economic price so that they could reach as many people as possible.
The issues that were relevant questions in the 1930s recession are still valid today.
Now we're facing the second large recession in this country since the 1930s, and these issues, I feel like, are rearing their heads again. So it's important for the show to look back on this, to look at it in a new frame, and to examine some of these questions and these images with an eye to how it can help us think differently about the present moment, or what kind of questions do these artworks prompt that might help us get at a better understanding of what's happening now and how to move forward.
Like the artists of the Red Decade, today social movements in the US continue to use art and technology as their main weapon for social change. The recent Occupy Wall Street movement denouncing economic inequality, and the most recent protests in Ferguson, Missouri against the death of an African-American young man by the police are only a couple of examples of how organizers keep the legacy of the Left Front alive through art. This is Clara Ibarra with Carolina Crone, Telesur, New York.
Well, that's all for today's The Real USA. Don't forget to share your comments and suggestions via our Twitter @Telesur English. I'm Alexandra Hall. See you next time.